Hagen had an accident, but Mondo made him better. Here's a look at the brand new Mondo Batman the Animated Series Clayface 1/6 scale figure, timed exclusive. Complete with swappable hands, portraits, and weapons, our massive Clayface 1/6 scale figure features semi-seamless joints with an articulated ratcheted inner skeleton. Restricted to 1,500 units, this exclusive edition also features a slew of amazing extras, including additional hands and portraits, the magnetic trapped Batman chest accessory, and the clay puddle display, which fits with all included portraits. What a feat of clay. Thankfully, though, Daggett wasn't the one that made him. Before, though, we get a closer look at the new Mondo Batman the Animated Series timed edition of Clayface. Yeah. I'd like to first back it up a bit and thank the folks over at Mondo that did provide this sample. Mondo, in fact, made two versions of Clayface available on their site, a timed edition that sold for $280, where the exclusive had unique accessories that weren't available with the regular. There was also, again, a regular version of Clayface that sold for $260. So the exclusive sold for $280, the regular for $260. Unfortunately, though, both of them sold out fast, real fast. Now, you can be notified by email. Perhaps down the road, Mondo may decide to release this guy again, and you could be notified when he does. He is a tall figure, though, considerably tall, as you'll see when we bring in the other Mondo Animated Series figures we've looked at in the past. But living for the now, living for the present, we're going to take the tape measure and see just how tall Hagen stands. And you'll see he's quite tall, 13.5 centimeters, 13.5 inches in height, working out to be a figure that's about 34.5 centimeters tall. If we're looking at the heights of Hagen, and we do want to compare with the Cape Crusader, well, here's what the figure looks like with Mondo's Animated Series Batman. Batman stands 12 inches. Clayface is what, another quarter still, even when we bring in the Clown Prince of Crime Joker. Now, Joker was a figure that was actually taller than Batman, but he's nowhere near the height of Clayface. Obviously, that's not going to change at all either when we bring in Joker's pudding, Harley Quinn. Cover this first. The figure does come included with a display stand, and quite a large display stand, too, to occupy the footprint space of Clayface. Now, the stand does have two parts. Of course, you have yourself the neck that just plugs into the actual base. The base comes out of the box like this with a little slot there on the top just by Batman's ears. And of course, you take yourself the adjustable neck. The neck then plugs into that slot. I know we're kind of covering off things you guys already know for yourselves, but it just slots in place. And then you've got yourself a waist clip. Normally, though, the waist clips would be more circular, but this one actually is more shaped like a triangle, almost essentially a triangle with the corners cut off. The idea with that, though, is it's supposed to fit then around Clayface's body. I would recommend, though, first prying this away, like opening it up just a little bit, because you do want to make sure that you're getting it around Clayface's body. The one worry, though, that I have, and it hasn't been yet an issue I've faced, is that when you do get this around Clayface's body, you have to be careful, though, that it doesn't puncture into the plastic or that rubbery material that they're using for his torso. Even when you're kind of putting it around his waist like this, you can see, though, that they've put rubber caps or little end pieces just so that the actual wire, the metal piece, doesn't actually start to clip into the plastic. But even still, though, when you're putting this on display, my one worry really is, yes, it is going to be holding the weight of Clayface, and it holds it successfully. The one issue, though, I kind of have, though, is if you don't have it in the proper place, which I don't have it in the proper place, it starts, first of all, to kind of catch this area right around here. And this is all, by the way, a softer plastic. I don't want this to necessarily start to warp the plastic. I certainly don't want it to start puncturing marks into the actual torso area of the figure. The figure seems to stand fine on his own. Keeping in mind, though, he doesn't actually have anything on the ends of his arms, though. We will be changing that shortly. Moving now away from display stands and now to a lot of mud. The figure does have exclusive accessories, again, specific to this figure's release, and then he also has regular version accessories, which are essentially right over here. All the timed exclusives are here. The regular version accessories are right here. So you can kind of choose for yourself. If you can't get your hands on the exclusive, are you going to be missing out on any of the things that we're about to cover? First things first, though, and probably of the largest exclusive accessories, the figure does have his mud puddle. The mud puddle, though, would basically work with any one of the heads. So you see yourself quite a large ball joint there on the top. It doesn't have to even be the heads that are for this exclusive release. Let's just say, for example, you want to use this head. All of them have the exact same universally sized hole on the bottom. So all you really have to do is just attach it onto the mud puddle like that. You still retain some levels of posability, but you can have yourself Clayface and a puddle. One way to kind of really work with the idea that he has so many multiple heads like this is you could have your main Clayface, your hero Clayface, with the head that you want to use, and then just use the other puddle. Just use another head with the puddle that comes exclusive for this figure, and then you just have that displayed along with the figure as well. That's kind of cool. It's a fair bit of plastic too. While the display base, though, is a hard plastic, all of the main head pieces, though, of Clayface are a little bit more of a softer. There's a little more give to them. And well, again, we'll kind of cover off all of that. The figure does also have a bit of a nod to the original Kenner Clayface, that he does have like the bladed hand. This hand, though, I did notice getting out of the packaging, one of the blades, a couple actually, these two blades are a little on the more warp side. I do actually love that they've added a reflective look to it. And again, it looks just exactly like the Clayface. Clayface, I think, had like a ball mace in one hand, and then he sort of had this hand on the other side. I think that's a really cool nod that they threw that in there. Again, unfortunately on mine, and it will likely be the case, I'm sure, with everybody that's picked up theirs, these little nails right here are a little on the more warp side. See how they're kind of bending off to the side, so I'll have to heat these up, maybe up in hot water, or might even not display the figure with that at all. Very cool looking hand, though. Something also that's cool, too, is that this Clayface for the exclusive comes with the molded cowl of Batman that we see in the Feet of Clay. Batman's head, of course, is sticking out the top of Clayface's head. Really cool. I think that's a nice little nod. I love the fact that they've chosen to paint this. Now, again, like with these heads, all of them are pretty much just using, again, this Clayface color. But I do actually like that with Clayface. His eyes are always known for being glowing in yellow. And I like that they've also done that with Batman's, too. There's no posability necessarily on the heads. All of the heads' real posability work with all the essentially attaching onto the ball joints here, or again, onto the pooled clay. Something also that's really neat, too, is that they also include the Clayface that has the grappling line that shoots out the top of his head. And that gets accomplished by actually having two separate pieces. You have Clayface's head, obviously, in excruciating pain. And then there's the opening or exiting wound you can see there on the top with some splashing out clay effect. And then you've got the claw piece for, of course, the grapple gun that Batman uses to escape from Clayface. And how it essentially works is there's a hole on the inside like this, and there's a hole on the outer. There's a circular peg on the end. And that just plugs in place, just like that. We want to make sure, of course, when you're also getting that in, just holding it up to the light, there seems to be, like there's a little indentation here. You just want to make sure you got it lined up the right way. But yeah, that looks like it's just really neat. I mean, the idea of that shooting out the top, again, some may choose, maybe not necessarily want to get the Clayface that actually has that, but the fact that they actually include that as a reference to the original episode, I think that's really, really neat. Let's move those also off to the side. One last thing, though, that comes included with the exclusive timed edition, that he also has the emerging Cape Crusader from his chest. This is a really nice effect. Just to kind of bring in Batman here just for a second, show you guys the scaling of that. It's a little bit smaller, but not enough that it looks out of place. Batman, of course, is clawing, grasping for air, as he's trying to emerge from the front chest piece of Clayface. So instead of actually having to worry about this attaching onto his torso, like, how is this really going to work? What they've done instead is they've embedded in magnets. So it just essentially attaches onto his torso like that. How much harder could that really be? I mean, yes, because it's smaller like this, and because there's some additional texturing lines here, it doesn't quite look like it's the rest of his torso. But having even that as an accessory is such a neat looking touch. Again, having that just as magnets too. I mean, it's so much easier to worry about without having to peg that into his place or swapping out torso pieces or anything like that. Magnets the best way to go. So those are all the accessories over here that, again, are for the exclusive edition. If we move now our focus over here, these are all the things that are exclusive, really even so much not exclusive, but these are all the ones that are part of the regular version of Clayface. First, you should get yourself the little jar of Renew You from Daggett. Daggett doesn't actually, or the container doesn't actually open up. I think that would have been cool if they could have had the way to take the lid off, so you could actually have seen some Renew You on the inside of the jar. To include that, though, still is a nice little touch. I'm actually surprised, though, that this gets included with the regular version of Clayface and not with the exclusive. Put that off to the side. What else do we have? The figure does have a whole bunch of different hands. Now, he has closed fists right now. I have already taken the luxury of swapping out one of the hands, and they're easy to do. I'll show you guys that in a second. You get yourself a pair of closed fists, all hard plastic here. You also get yourself a couple of gripping hands. Not that he necessarily has anything to grip. I guess you could take yourself the jar of Renew You and just kind of wedge that in between his hand like that, so you can actually have him holding. And he holds it really quite well, too. The figure does also come included with a couple of dynamic hands. Again, swapping these hands can be super easy to do. I know I keep showing you this, I keep talking about it, but I've yet to really show you. The figure does also have a claw hand. And all of these work with universally sized holes on the inside. So again, you just remove the hands from the ends of his forearms and swap them out there. It comes with also a couple of cinder block hands. Now here's where we start to see a little more of a softer material being used. These have more of a squishier feel, and I don't feel like that's necessarily a bad thing at all that they're using more of a softer plastic for some of these. Clayface does have those seamless arms, which again kind of uses that same formula, and he also does the same thing with his torso too. So again, like he's got a couple of cinder blocks. Those are always really neat. He also gets the mace gun, or the mace weapon as well. Now, these spikes themselves, even though, I mean, they're prickly, obviously, to put your finger across these, but the actual spikes, a little more softer plastic, really nicely detailed. All of these accessories, I love that they've added all these additional, like little clay marks, like the clay is overlapping one another. Some cell shading is also added in there as well for good measures. Really fun looking accessories. What else does he have? A big giant hook. The hook hand also just obviously swaps out with the hands that he currently has right now. Again, a little more of a softer plastic, not a bad thing at all. These just, again, swap out. I know I keep saying the word swapping out, and I've yet to do any swapping out. Comes also included with a big spike. Spike is very much similar, though, to the individual bladed fingers. You get a little bit of the lighter coloring added in there as well for reflection, the darker shadowing on the one side. Somewhat similar, a little bit of a different color. It doesn't have as much of that lighter blue in there. It's kind of more of a light gray, but really, again, nice little accessories. The last thing that we'll have a look at before we do start swapping things out, figure has a big giant axe. Now the axe, you can see, materializes, forms its way out from what's left of the clay. The clay, I think, is kind of interesting that it looks like it's a face. Eyes, maybe a bit of a mouth. It does actually kind of look like Clayface is angry just through his blade. The blade doesn't feel sharp, but it does feel certainly spiky on the ends. So just be careful of that. By the way, though, again, before we look at the heads, again, I keep saying all this time of swapping out the hands. To swap out the hands, it's just a case of holding onto the forearm, popping that off, find the hand that we want to use. You want to use the axe? So again, the axe will just plug onto the peg like that. Not hard at all. You want to do it on the other side too? Okay, we'll do it on the other side. We'll just pop that off. What do we want to use? Maybe we'll use one of the cinder blocks. We'll just use the blocked hands. And again, that just plugs in place. The pegs and the holes are so, I mean, they work so well with one another. Swapping out the hands, I never feel like I have to really struggle, really have to force to remove that, have to add any additional exerted force to get these properly popped back into the peg. Last things up for Clayface is some swappable heads. Now, again, we've already kind of looked at two heads, being one that is resembling Batman, being one that, of course, has the grappling hook shooting out the top of the head. That's really cool. Last things up, though, the figure does have 3 swappable heads. Now, this is just, again, for the standard version. You get the one that I think is actually coming out of the box with the figure, which is kind of just a regular, I don't want to say neutral expression, but certainly is more just the traditional Clayface. Then you also get a screaming Clayface head, which again does have really nicely colored teeth, top and the bottom, more of kind of a pastel yellow, matching that, of course, in the coloring of the eyes. I do like, though, that when it comes to the eyes, that they outline the eyes in black. Boy, that's a nice looking figure head. Now, to swap out the head, I already taken the liberty of actually putting in the smiling face for the beginning of this review. But again, similar though to the hands, you're just going to go ahead and grab the head and pop it off the ball joint, just like that. The ball joint is the exact same size, obviously, as the puddle of clay. Take the head then you want to use and just plug it back onto the ball joint. It still retains some level of posability that we'll kind of talk more about in a moment. You can move the head, back and forth, up and down, no issues there at all. But having three sweet looking heads, I think for me as a fan of Clayface, I probably will end up displaying this guy on the shelf with a smiling face. Definitely, though, my favorite of the 3. These are all, by the way, harder plastic. You'll notice, though, when it comes to the hand attachments, the legs maybe a little bit also as well, but more so the head. They're a little more of a darker color than the main majority of his torso. The torso and his arms are actually using sort of an overlay of rubber plastic. Let's just move actually the puddle out of the way here for a second. So again, like his arms are seamless. His torso, and I'll show you guys also this as well. Let's take the arms off here. I just kind of want to swap them out to regular hands here. Just plug that back onto the peg. We'll do the same thing on the cinder block side, and we'll just kind of give them some dynamic hands, just so that they're out of the way. It's going to make things a little bit easier when it comes to the mobility of the figure. So Clayface, again, we kind of looked at the head sculpt. The head is a little bit of a different color from the rest of his torso, but not to the point where it feels jarring or looks jarring. Now, one thing, though, that they've chosen to do with Clayface is that they've covered over the arms. So the joint is still in there, but it's overlaid by the soft rubber plastic. It does give him at least a finished looking look. I'm generally one that I don't mind if they had just used a hinge joints or actually just elbow joints visible, but I do actually appreciate the fact that Mondo would have taken a time like this to cover over the arms like this. Now, you can still fully retain articulation. It's a case just of bending at the elbows, and it does seem like he's got maybe a single hinge in the elbow, even if though it folds a little bit right here. It does look like it would be like with clay developed, like clay just sort of settling on itself. The top of the torso again, this is all very soft plastic, especially down below here in the torso. Is it a bad thing? Not necessarily. I feel like in a case like this, yes, I think I could have preferred to have this more of a harder plastic. But I also kind of have to keep in mind too, for the size of what this figure is, this would have also increased the weight of him too. Now, keep it in mind too, like he's generally built very big. Top very large in the torso, very small tree stump sized legs. If you had swapped this out, for example, the softer plastic, the soft rubber, in favor of a hard plastic, you would have increased the weight of the figure. I think that would have also stressed then to his knees and his ankles. And also if they had done the same here with his arms, I think you also would have increased the price of this figure. Selling though for $280, I think you could be easily expected to pay closer to $400 if they swapped out the materials and used a harder plastic. In the end though, I say this only more for, I just want the longevity of this figure still to be good down the road. Maybe, yes, it may not be a case where these would start to split over time. I mean, obviously, I've had figures where they haven't split. I've had some figures that do split. Mondo, again, like generally uses pretty good materials when it comes to the production of their figures. I don't think it's going to be an issue. And keeping in mind, too, you're not going to be putting necessarily him in dynamic poses. There's not much that you can really do with his arms or his torso where I feel like it's going to be adding stress to the materials that they decided to use. Clayface's body overall, though, again, like he's got a lot of good stuff going on here. Ripples and folds and all the things you'd expect Clayface to have. Lots of cool details added in there as well. I like, though, that all the crevices that they've done, they've sculpted and then finished it off with the brown. So it adds a little bit of level of detail to it. Clayface overall, again, like one of my favorite characters of all time, and especially the way that he was portrayed in the Batman animated series. Is this a true service to, I think, Clayface the character? Absolutely. Again, I would have, again, rather this been harder plastic, but I can certainly understand why they chose to go the route that they did, to give them more of the seamless look. Now, for Clayface's articulation, we're going to run through this. That obviously starting things first with his head, it's going to be on the ball joint. Despite having what would seem like a very self-contained head where you wouldn't really be able to move it all that much, the head does surprisingly move quite well. You can move the head up and down, and you can also move it back and forth. You could technically rotate it. But when you do rotate it here, let's just pick the figure up here. When you do rotate it, you do feel like this is rubbing against the plastic. But generally, I think for having, though, very close, I mean, he's got very little in the way of neck. Clayface's head surprisingly does move quite well. For his torso, what's interesting about his torso is there is actually a crunch. So when you take his torso, you can actually bend it all the way back. And you can actually see, too, on the inside how his body essentially works. When you obviously move it back like this, yes, you're going to see a big noticeable gap. I don't think most people are probably going to be displaying their figure like that. Even if you just have it in its defaulted state or just slightly further back from that, you don't see any of that. And, of course, you can also move it quite a further forward, too. And normally I would say, like, with a figure having so much heft in the top of his torso, and if this was harder plastic, I think he probably would be more likely to fall forward. He seems to really be able to balance a lot of his weight quite well. Now, his waist, his torso, not only does move forward and back, but you can also move it back and forth this way as well. His arms do move forward and back. Those are separate, obviously. There's ratcheted joints there for the shoulders. He is noisy, but he's noisy for a reason. That's because, again, like over the time, he's going to be able to maintain these joints, and they're not going to develop looseness. For his elbows, again, you've got an elbow bend. It does seem possibly like he's even got a double hinge in the elbow rather than just the one. And you can move it back and forth that way. Obviously, the hands, we already know, like the hands can rotate all the way around. You can hinge them back and forth. His lower torso doesn't do all that much. Most of the majority of what he's getting for articulation comes more so from the top. It doesn't feel, though, like he's got any posability point in his waist. Legs do split out. They don't move very far out, but I think they move far enough than what they need to do. I mean, obviously, Clayface, you're not going to be getting him in karate poses, but I think he has just the right posability that he needs. There's a little bit of a swivel there at the top of the thigh. The figure does also have a hinge in his knee, but there's not much of a hinge, and I don't think it necessarily needs to move any more than what he's moving right now. The foot does move back and forth. You can also move it up and down there as well. Technically, I suppose you could rotate it all the way around too. But he has, I think, the posability a Clayface character needs to have. He doesn't necessarily need to go in any crazy looking poses. What he really has more than anything else is shelf appeal. This is the kind of figure, though, that when you're looking at him, I've had more fun in like the last 3.5 hours I've had this guy in the box just by mixing and matching the parts that he comes included with. Yes, the timed edition, the exclusive version, does have some fun little extra things that wasn't available with the regular release. Like, for example, the jettisoned grapple line from the top of Clayface's head. He does, of course, have also the puddle pool. Those are all fun things, but even like if you don't get your chance to grab the exclusive version, I think there's still mileage to be made for all just the regular things that have with the standard version of Clayface. Some swappable heads, and like all three of the heads look fantastic. Even though like this one has more of the angrier expression. I think if anything, I probably will end up displaying Clayface on the shelf with a smiling face, as it's definitely my favorite of the three. Loads of hands to choose from. Regular, whether you want to, again, just have regular hands or you want to get a little crazier with Clayface, then of course you can bring in things like his axe. You can bring in things like, the spike that he has, or even, again, like a reference to the original 80s toys, the original Kenner toys, for example. Lots of good stuff going on. A lot of good stuff. 80s, I should really have said 90s, but a lot of good stuff, though, going on here for the Mondo release of Clayface. He does, though, make up certainly for a much bigger looking figure. I feel like he should be as well. I think scale-wise, he's pretty good scale in line with Batman. I mean, Batman, I think, like, to go back and look at the original animated series episode of Feet of Clay, or any of the numerous appearances that Clayface has in the series, Clayface should be a lot bigger than Batman, and I think they fit him well. It's a great looking figure. For, again, the price, $280, $260 for the standard, $280 for the exclusive. It's not a bad price at all. If you were lucky, again, that's the hard thing. As soon as these things drop on Mondo's site, they sell out fast. Clayface, as soon as they announced that they were going to be doing a Clayface from the animated series, first I said to myself, I got to get my hands on a Clayface. Second of all, I said to myself, there's a good likelihood that this guy is going to sell extremely fast, and he did. You can only hope, though, that Mondo does decide to release this guy again, because again, like, there's so much unique molding that went into Hagen that wasn't really available like for a Batman or a Joker. I mean, they can't really get much more mileage out of this mold other than just doing another Clayface, and I certainly hope that they do, so the collectors that missed their chance to get Matt Hagen the first time around can get their chance again to grab this guy and add him to their collection. Now, I do ask, as we wrap up the review here for the Mondo Clayface, that we do suspend some disbelief. Obviously, Batman's good, but he's not good enough to have two hands, obviously, to help him emerge from the chest cavity of Clayface, but then somehow have a third hand to shoot a grapple line out of the head of Hagen. I did want to make use, though, of some of the exclusive accessories as we wrap up this review. Those are actually two exclusive accessories, among also an alternate Batman head portrait. He also comes included with, obviously, the big pool of mud, which is also great, too, if you want to have the figure displayed with one of the alternate heads. I mean, there's only one ball joint on the top of his shoulders, yet, though, he has so many eligible contenders when it comes to different portraits. One kind of cool thing, though, about the exclusive, as I did say in this review, is you could use then one of the other heads that you're not currently occupying with the Clayface body, just attach it onto the mud puddle and have it displayed alongside the figure. There's a lot of good accessories to go around. Even if, though, you missed your chance to get the $280 exclusive version of Clayface, for spending $20 less and getting the $260, you're still getting quite a lot of hands, 3 different head portraits, not to mention as well, the figure does also come included with a little jar of Renew You. The problem with that, though, even though I could say $260 for the regular, $280 for the exclusive, either way, though, unfortunately, Clayface sold out really fast on Mondo's site. It seemed almost as if as soon as it dropped on their listings, he sold out in record time. Now, I can only hope, again, as I said in this review, that Mondo sees that and realizes that there's collectors that still want to get their hands on Clayface, that they make it available again. What I can always really say, too, is that you can go into the option of notify me when available. Put in your email, put in all your details, so that if in the off chance that Mondo does release Matt Hagen again, you can get your hands on Clayface and add this guy to your collection. Some of the things, though, for Clayface that I thought would bother me, like having the seamless arms and having generally a rubbery torso, bothers me less, actually, the more that I have this guy on display. Yes, the rubbery arms and kind of covering over the joints does then mean that there's no real way to access those joints if anything really happens to them. But you're not really going to be putting this guy in extreme poses anyways. With ratcheted joints also working with this figure, you know right away what you're able to move by the sounding that it makes. With the torso being also made of a softer material, again, it makes probably the most sense because, again, like, not only had they used a harder plastic, would have increased the weight of this figure and added more stress, unnecessary stress to the knees, to the ankles, but also, too, if they'd used hard plastic, the same kind of head, like same kind of plastic as like his accessories, it would have also increased the price of this figure. You'd go then away from a $260 or $280 price, more probably closer to around $400. Still, though, I think it's definitely a well worth figure. If you're not able to obviously get him on Mondo's website, if you're able to at least find him on aftermarkets like an eBay or some other sites that stock right now the Mondo figure releases, and you're a big fan of Clayface, it's definitely a recommended figure if you're able to get him. Now, again, a big thank you to the folks over at Mondo that did provide this sample. We had the chance today to have a look at the exclusive version of Clayface, which, again, is essentially the same figure. It's just going to have some accessories that are part of the exclusive, and then obviously there's are going to be having accessories that are going to be for the exclusive and the regular version. What do you guys, though, think of Clayface? Let me know down below in the comments section. Definitely worth the pickup, or do you think it's just too big? I mean, yes, it's one of the things, though, that Clayface, as a figure that towers over 30 centimeters in height, he's going to, yes, be asking a little bit more shelf space, but if you have the space, I definitely think it's worth the allocation for this figure. If you guys did enjoy this video, you can certainly do it a solid and throw it a like. If you guys want to stick around for more, so I hope so. We're going to have some more videos obviously coming your way for the rest of this week, so I hope you guys are going to be coming back for those. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.